After I finished recording those last few videos, I was thinking about the fact that many of the exercises it gave us this week were things we've sort of already done. They were just function versions of things we've already done. So we haven't really gotten that much value added out of ChatGPT. And also because we've actually written some of the same functions already in the lectures. And I was also thinking, well, we could ask for more exercises, but then I have to argue with it about how the exercises work. But we could also ask for a different kind of exercise. Because in this course, there is a lot of posted material that are exercises involving writing functions. Here's a specification, write a function for it. Maybe we can get ChatGPT to suggest some exercises involving, I don't know, maybe fixing broken functions, maybe debugging. That's something that's very difficult to practice because usually when you're debugging, it's, your assignment code and it's an hour before the deadline and you don't really have that much time to sort of rigorously unpack what skills you need to debug. So we'll see if ChatGPT can help us. Now, my warning though is I probably will have to argue a bit with it about the debugging exercise because if I'm asking it to generate code for me that I can debug, it might generate code that contains concepts that we haven't seen yet in the course. So I may have to skip over a few options. I'm still learning about functions in my C programming course. I want to practice debugging. Can you generate some broken code involving, I think it'll know what I mean. Can you create a debugging exercise involving functions? And I suspect it might try and bring in some code with features that I don't know about yet, so I might have to ask for a replacement exercise. Of course, here's an exercise here that involves functions in C programming. We're going to be presented with a piece of code that contains some bugs, and my task is to identify and fix the issues. Okay, so here's a function to compute the factorial of a number, and then there's a function to compute the nth term of the Fibonacci sequence. Okay, and here I print that stuff out. Now, this is actually a pretty nice debugging exercise, but it involves recursion. Recursion is wonderful. I love recursion. However, I don't know that we all want to do that kind of debugging exercise this week. So there are some videos in the sequence about what recursion is, and you're welcome to use recursion, and you might even want to ask ChatGPT for this exercise to debug some recursion. Just to remind you, recursion is where a function calls itself. So we can see here a call to the factorial function inside the factorial function. It's a wonderful concept, but something that we're not going to worry about and will not be on our midterm. So in that case, I think maybe we'll ask it to skip over that. So I'm going to say, I don't want to use recursion right now. I feel bad saying that because I love recursion, but I do like recursion in general. Can you make another exercise that doesn't involve recursion? Okay, here's an exercise. It looks like it's a pretty similar exercise that it claims doesn't involve recursion. So it involves functions that doesn't use recursion. Okay, there we go. There's the factorial function. And then here is this other function, apparently a function to sum all of the even numbers up to a given limit. Okay, so there's that. And then there's a quick main function that just calls each thing. So what we'll do is we'll copy this code. I guess there's a little hotkey for it. Copy code, okay. And then we'll head over to Jupyter Hub, and I'm going to replace my exercise code with the code that ChatGPT generated. So all it said, I think, I'm going to reread the prompt, it says, I'll need to identify any bugs in the code that might prevent it from running correctly. Make sure these two functions are working as intended and producing the expected output. So what I'm interpreting this to mean is that it seems to say that the code will probably compile, but it doesn't guarantee me that. So maybe the code doesn't compile. I need to fix whatever bugs are affecting that. But it's also saying, make sure the functions are working as intended. Now, what that tells me is that apparently I should assume these comments that say what the function does are to be interpreted as being correct. So if the function doesn't do what the comment says, that's a bug in the function and I have to fix it. So we'll go back over to our code. The very first thing I'm going to do is try running the code. Okay, and I'll see what happens if I run it. It does look like it did compile, and it looks like it generated, let's see, so it's generating some output. The factorial of 5 is apparently 120, and we know from a few exercises ago that actually, yeah, factorial of 5 is 120. The sum of even numbers up to 10 is 30. Okay, so what are all the even numbers less than or equal to 10? I'm assuming it means only positive or 0 values. Well, okay, so if I add the even numbers and I include 0, that doesn't really change anything. So 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8. In the function definition, does it say whether it says the sum of all even numbers up to a given limit? And I noticed that it's ambiguous, but it seems to mean the limit is going to be included. So I guess that means that the sum of even numbers up to 10 should be 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8 plus 10. Okay, so let's see. 2 plus 4, that's going to be 6. 6 plus 6 is 12. 12 plus 8 is 20. That's going to be, okay, so that is going to equal 30. Okay, so it prints out that the factorial of 5 is 120. The sum of even numbers up to 10 is 30. And that doesn't look incorrect. That looks like it's working correctly. So what does that mean? Does that mean that ChatGPT made a mistake? Or does it mean that we're not debugging very well? I would argue that we have to give ourselves at least a little bit more information before we conclude the code is correct. You wouldn't assume your code is correct just because it generates the right output on one occasion. I shouldn't assume somebody else's code is correct for the same reason. Let's see if it can generate the factorial of 6 and the sum of all even numbers up to 15, let's say. Or no, let's go easy on it, and we'll start with 14. All right, the factorial of 6 is apparently 720. Okay, that looks correct. I happen to know the factorial of 6, and it actually is 720. The sum of all even numbers up to 14 is 56. Okay, so let's just see if we can work that out ourselves. 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8 plus 10 plus 12 plus 14. Now, we already know that the sum of even numbers up to 10 is 30. We verified that ourselves just a minute ago. And then these two numbers here, that adds to 26. So this does equal 56. Okay, so I haven't seen the bugs yet. Let's ask it for the factorial of 3. No, the factorial of 3 should be 6. So, and then we'll ask it to sum up the even numbers up to 5. Okay, so the factorial of 3 is 6. That looks correct. The sum of even numbers up to 5. Well, 5 itself is not an even number, so it should just be 2 plus 4, which does equal 6. This is sort of weird. Okay, so where are the bugs that we were promised? That's a tough one. And many of you have this experience of staring at a midterm question and saying, how is there an answer to this question? Is there a mistake in the question? Now, it's tough because it could be that even I am missing the bug. That is absolutely possible. So even I can't do every programming exercise. Even I can't find every bug. I can find lots of bugs, but many of them I find just because I've seen a lot of bugs in my life. If there are bugs in this code, they're hiding pretty well by my standards. So here's what I'm going to do. We have my new colleague ChatGPT as a tool, and I can use it as a tool to help me do the exercises that it suggests. So let's ask it. I'm not finding any bugs. Can you give me a hint? Certainly, I'd be happy to give you a hint. Let's focus on the sum even numbers function. It's intended to calculate the sum of all even numbers up to a given limit. Check the loop condition carefully and make sure it's covering all even numbers in the specified range. And if you're not seeing any bugs, try stepping through it manually with a specific example. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Sum even numbers. If I want to sum all the even numbers up to a particular limit, I might start at 2, and then I work ahead by 2. So the reason why, to me, this doesn't look incorrect is that we've already seen this example. We've talked about iterating over all of the even numbers, and we've used logic very similar to this. And so I've looked at this loop condition carefully. If I trace this by hand, I expect that I would get the same result that I got here. Now, the reason I know that, it's sometimes dangerous to say, oh, if I trace this, I'm going to get this answer. The reason that I know that is I know what it gives me for the sum of even numbers up to 10, and I know what happens if I compute the sum of even numbers up to 10 myself just by hand. So I'm not tracing, I'm just doing this sum by hand, and I also get 30. So there's some evidence that the number that's coming out is 30, and the number that's coming out is supposed to be 30. So I have a feeling that this is not incorrect on this case. So let's ask it if it can justify its answer. Can you give, so let's take a look at the function signature. So the function sum even numbers takes an argument called limit. For sum even numbers, can you give a possible value of the argument limit where the result of the function is incorrect? Certainly, let's consider the sum even numbers function with a limit equal to 9. Okay, so according to the code, the function should compute the sum of even numbers up to 9. Let's go through the loop logic. Okay, so it says the loop starts with I equals 2 and then increments by 2 at each iteration. It's trying to give an explanation of what the loop does. The value of I will be 2, 4, 6, 8. If we add these even numbers together, we get 20, which is not the expected result for the sum of even numbers up to 9. It's not the expected result. I see. I'm beginning to wonder whether ChatGPT knows what it's talking about. Why don't we ask it, so what is the expected result for the sum of even numbers up to 9? I apologize. Oh. Okay, I apologize for any confusion. You don't need to apologize, but you do owe me an explanation. The sum of even numbers up to 9 is indeed 20. So the original code is correct in this regard. It seems that there was a misunderstanding, and the code is functioning as expected. There are no bugs in the sum even numbers function for the provided, okay. Thanks for the clarification. Are there any bugs in the code at all? It's thinking. I apologize for the confusion earlier. After carefully reviewing the code again, I confirmed that there are no bugs in the provided code. Okay, well, yeah, thanks for trying. This is a first, though. I mean, usually I ask people for correct code and they give me broken code. Here, in what has to be the first time this has ever happened to me, I have asked somebody to give me broken code and they couldn't do it. They gave me correct code. I see. I think we're going to call it for this exercise and then maybe come back in a minute and we can try this again and see if it deserves a second